So a month into the season, I have some updated thoughts on what I'm thinking about for the upcoming playoff and really the rest of the season, and having some games to be able to assess where these teams are up to this point in the season. And that's exactly what I'm going to address in this video, along with the 3 predictions preview for the upcoming week. Welcome to College Football Media. If you're new here, we talk about teams, trends, and traditions to logos, history, and predictions. If that sounds interesting to you, consider subscribing for more in-depth college football content. So 4 weeks into the season, and these are the thoughts that are beginning to go through my head and what I'm thinking so far. The Pac-12 is out. They really don't have a chance at getting into the playoff. Cal is still unbeaten at this point, but I don't expect Cal to continue to go unbeaten and win the Pac-12. There are several good teams within the Pac-12, but I don't think there will be one that stands out above the rest. At this point, it might still be Utah or possibly Oregon if they can continue to win in the Pac-12, and they have, you might could consider it a good loss against Auburn, unlike some of the other Pac-12 teams who are losing to other teams within the conference. But for the most part right now, I'm thinking that the Pac-12 doesn't really have a shot at the playoff yet again. Another team that I've changed my mind about from the preseason is Michigan. At this point, Michigan, their season is effectively lost. You don't expect them to win the Big Ten championship. You don't expect them to get into the playoff. And a lot of people are questioning Jim Harbaugh's job. And that honestly is fair. I understand people questioning his job. And the one thing that he can do to save that job is beat Ohio State. If Michigan goes and they say they win 6 games this season, but it gets to the end of the season and they really have nothing to play for except beating their rival, there can be just enough motivation to beat Ohio State. Some other teams have done that before in different rivalry games, right? They don't have a lot to play for except for pride. And so sometimes they get to rivalry week and they lay it all out on the line, and they can come up with a huge upset. If that happens, then Jim Harbaugh's job could be saved. But unless that happens, I think Michigan's season looks pretty grim. On a more positive note, teams that have really surprised me this season so far are Oklahoma, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Auburn. They all look a lot better than I expected them to be coming into the season. Oklahoma has an improved defense, and their offense looks as good as ever, with the main difference being they have an experienced championship quarterback at the helm. Ohio State just looks consistent. They're blowing teams out, and there's not being a whole lot of attention drawn to them because they're doing what they're supposed to do. Not really close games, they're just going out and winning. Wisconsin, I think, had a down season last year. They were good a couple years ago, and they might have slumped a bit, and now they're back up, and they look really, really strong this season. More of a Georgia-style offense, you might could say, with the run game and the power that they have, and the defense that they have. But so far, they've really been dominating in their performances so far this season, which has been a pleasant surprise for Wisconsin. And the other team I mentioned was Auburn. And you have to understand that Gus Malzahn is back into play calling, and they have a freshman quarterback. But what is carrying Auburn so far this season is their defense. They've just got a really, really good defense this year. And that defense might be good enough to carry them throughout the rest of the season, and perhaps really compete for maybe even an SEC West championship to be able to make it to the conference championship. You don't know. You don't necessarily expect that. You don't want to set the bar too high with a freshman quarterback in Bo Nix, but their defense is really good and will keep them in a lot of close games. And you'll just have to see if Auburn can win those close games in the fourth quarter. Of course, other teams that have been talked about as being really good throughout this season, LSU, Georgia, Notre Dame impressed this past week by the way that they played Georgia. You also got to think about Clemson and Alabama. They look good as usual. And so there's a lot of good teams, and some that you may not have expected, some that you might have thought been trending down. But again, this season, those are a large majority of the teams that we have, or that I think are playoff contenders and have done a good job so far. So now let's go ahead and go into the 3 predictions that I have for week 5. So starting out with the Gridiron guarantee, Stanford is favored at Oregon State by only 4 points. I understand Stanford has not looked too good throughout the first 4 weeks of this season. They have a couple losses, including one to UCF. But even though they're traveling to Oregon State is not that good yet. They're still Oregon State. And trust me, Stanford is not that bad yet to only be a 4-point favorite to the Beavers. Stanford is not the same team that they were a couple years ago. We understand that. But Stanford is still good enough to be able to go to Oregon State and win without it being a close game. So I guarantee that the Cardinal goes and beats the Beavers. For the next prediction, I'm once again discussing the UCLA Bruins, but this time in the spot of an upset watch. The Bruins are traveling to the Arizona Wildcats, in which Arizona is favored by 7.5 points. Just a few weeks ago, it looked like Chip Kelly's team was a shoo-in to be a win for whoever they were playing. But after the performance that they gave last week and coming back and beating Washington State in their house, UCLA can definitely pull off an upset based on the offense that they showed in the second half of that game. So the outcome when they play Arizona will depend on what UCLA team decides to show up. Is it the team that played the beginning of the season, those first 3 games? Or is it the team that showed up in the second half against Washington State? If that team shows up, then they can definitely upset Arizona, because it'll really depend on which offense, with Khalil Tate or Chip Kelly in UCLA, whichever offense does better and obviously scores more points will win the game. And we don't expect a lot out of these defenses. So I think really it just depends on what UCLA team shows up. And if it is the team that scored 67 points against Washington State and had a 30-plus point comeback, I think 32-point comeback against Washington State, if that team shows up, then I would expect they legitimately could upset the Arizona Wildcats. Game of the week is in Lincoln, Nebraska, where Ohio State comes in and is favored by 17.5 points. So my prediction for this game is pretty straightforward. I think the Buckeyes come in with College Game Day present to build up some hype for the game, and Ohio State comes in and they beat the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I expect Nebraska and Coach Frost to put up a fight and not just hand Ohio State the game, but I don't necessarily think that they'll be challenged in, say, the fourth quarter or maybe even the second half, depending on how Ohio State comes out in this game. So what do you think? Let me know your predictions and thoughts on the season so far in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe for more college football content. Thank you again so much for watching College Football Media. Until next time, be goody now.